What's up, everybody? Thought it'd be something fun and different to give a summary of one of my favorite bodybuilding books. The reason is because everything that I've done over the last handful of years hasn't come from any sort of formal training at all. I don't have an exercise science degree or anything fancy like that. I've just read a lot of books and applied everything and been coached, and I get asked a lot where my sources have come from and where my knowledge of the industry has come from. And it's really just from people that have done it. If you want to do something, you find somebody that did it and see what their opinion is. So this gentleman here, Steve Reeves, is not alive today, unfortunately. So thankfully he left behind a book and a manual as to how he built his physique. So this is something that I shredded through years ago, and it's become a staple in my training and how I approach not just the sport of bodybuilding, but also my overall health in general. This book is an amazing resource for somebody that wants to be a competitor or somebody that just wants to be healthy regardless. So I thought this would be a good one to start with. And it's just classic too. It's a fun read. Basically what it is it's a memoir that starts from his childhood, goes all the way up through his bodybuilding career, his perspective on science and how he applied the science at the time. And a lot of the science in this book is a little outdated by modern standards, but it's just timeless nonetheless. Also, his strategic approach to artistically building muscle for classic physique proportions, comprehensive training methods and considerations, and answers to questions asked by fans worldwide. There's a transcription in here of a seminar that he did that there's basically just a bunch of questions and answers, and then he gives a speech, and so there's a lot of pretty awesome takeaways that I took out of that. But yeah, let's just jump right into the book. At first glance, the book is just classic. I'm probably going to say that a couple times in this video, but all the pictures are black and white, obviously, and his physique is just stunning. It is just incredible how this guy looks, and even the even the pictures of him lifting weights to demonstrate how to do the exercises, like it's him in front of mountains when he's doing them. The weights are all super old school, like this one here. He's in front of a bunch of clouds. I mean, there's a lot of nostalgia in this book. It's well written. It's fun. Like you really get a feel for his personality and who he is in this book. Most memorable quote, I would have to say, are pages 66 and 67. This book is still in print, by the way, so you can still grab it. I'll put a link to it in the description. But what is the classic physique? A classic physique is one that is in perfect proportion or as close to it as possible, and by proportion I mean the calves, the neck, and the biceps should all measure exactly the same. Also, you should strive for wide shoulders, small waist and hips, and everything else in between. Then he goes on to say, in building the classic physique, shy away from exercises that stress the trapezius muscles and at the base of the neck, because the bigger the traps are, the narrower your shoulders appear. So instead of a square-shouldered look, a person with overdeveloped traps looks round-shouldered. This is something that one of my judges, Terry Reeves, not related to Steve Reeves, told me at one of my first competitions, was that as far as my muscle mass, obviously I was my first competition, so I wasn't really stage lean. I wasn't as lean as I should have been to place well. But as far as muscularity goes, my shoulders were pretty well underdeveloped. So ever since then, this book has been a really helpful resource to me in balancing out my physique and building muscle in ways that give me more of a broad shoulder appearance instead of being slouched. Because if your traps are too big, then you just look like you're slouched. But if you pose correctly, this is something the judges were helping me with. You can hide the traps, and you can pose your shoulders at an angle that makes them appear broader instead of slouched and rounded. So that was something that was really helpful to me. Going on to the next page 67. If you have heavy bones, you can add 10 pounds to the weight calculations in the chart, but if you have light bones, you can subtract 10 pounds. And what he's referring to is this chart that he has on ideal weights for how tall you are. So I'm 6'1", so apparently 210 pounds is the ideal stage weight for me based off of how tall I am, by his suggestions, to have enough muscle to have a balanced physique, and so that I can sculpt something out of it, but not so much muscle to where I would just be way too big and unpleasing to the eye. So I did some calculations. If I add, this is just me personally, if you get this book, you can go through the chart and see, where you fit in on that. But basically, if I was to add 2 pounds every year, then in 20 years, I would be, in 10 years, I would be 20 pounds heavier with muscle mass. And that would put me at a stage weight of 205 in 2031, and I would be 38 years old. My last competitions, I was 183 pounds depleted on stage, and then when I filled up on carbs, I was 189 pounds. So I probably won't use carbs to fill out, because if I have the amount of muscle mass that I need to be able to have the physique that I want, then I'm probably not going to need to try to fill up with as much carbs as I can. I mean, me, I'm on the carnivore diet, and if I can build 2 pounds of muscle over the course of 10 years, then that's really what my goal is going to be. Or if I add 4 pounds a year, then obviously I would be age 33 with the same amount of muscle by then. So these figures that I've arrived at, this is him talking after training or studying the physiques of many champion athletes in many different sports. Once a person exceeds his ideal weight for his height, he becomes out of proportion and no longer possesses that classic physique, but doesn't function optimally either. Now, when he talks about a classic physique, he's not talking about the classic physique bodybuilding competition category that we have today, because they didn't even have that at the time. They had bodybuilding, and that was it. And then men's physique came out because bodybuilders got too big. And then once bodybuilders got too big, they had basically just two opposite ends of the extremes. You had the guys in the board shorts that is more like the beach body look, and then you had the guys that were just gigantic, and classic physique was created to basically put something in between. So he had the classic physique before we even have the classic physique that we know today. So the idea of classic physique in the IFBB, the International Federation of Bodybuilding, is an attempt to replicate the physique that Steve Reeves basically invented. Next thing he says is, when someone comes into a gym to build a classic physique, he or she should not be concerned with simply adding size for the sake of adding size, or lifting heavy weights simply for the purpose of lifting heavy weights. You must have a purpose or a reason for your training, and that reason should be tempered with only one word: proportion. He's really big on proportions. Then he says, you must exercise your muscles through their fullest possible range of motions. This means that complete extension and complete contraction in every single exercise, but get every last rep that you can every time that you perform. So pages 66 and 67, that was some of the biggest meat of this book. Then one of the biggest takeaways that I've got that I've been applying over the years too is chapter 14, building the classic physique routine. And he goes through an order. He trained 3 full body workouts per week. And I don't train full body workouts. They're not really as popular in bodybuilding. I know some people that do them. It's not really how I prefer to train, but I do train several body parts per workout instead of just like one day chest and one day back. I do arms like 5 days a week, and I don't really train them to failure because it's a weak point, and so I'm trying to bring them up and hit them with a little more frequency. But he starts with the shoulders, and then he works his way down through the rest of the body because of the way that his blood flows, which makes a lot of sense when you're speaking in terms of anatomy, because once you get blood into your shoulders, which is the top part of your body, then you work to your arms and your chest and your back. Then you end with the legs, because once you get blood into your legs, those are the biggest muscle group in your body. So getting a pump after that is like pretty much impossible. So when I'm like at a competition, for example, and I'm pumping up and I'm about to step on stage, then I'll do everything in that order because of what I read in this book. So I'll start with deltoids, and then I'll work from there to the other smaller muscles on the upper part of the body, which are the arms and and then work my way into the chest and the lats, which are the biggest part of the body from the waist up, and then pump the legs like literally last thing right before I step on stage. So that was a big takeaway that I got out of it. Chapter 22 is all about muscle control and the art of posing. This was an awesome chapter. He starts off by saying, practicing muscle control improves the line of communication between the brain and the muscle fibers being worked. This increases efficiency and the speed of muscle development and motor skills. He goes, I believe it will be worthwhile for anybody to spend 10 to 15 minutes a day practicing muscle control. This can be done in one session several times a day or over short periods. And he also recommends to spend twice as much time on that muscle group that you feel is not up to standards with the rest of your body. So when you practice posing, it's not just like that. That's why I flex so much at the gym. And some people get annoyed with it. My wife like won't work out with me because she gets embarrassed. But I love flexing in between sets because I can see my progress. But also flexing your muscles and being able to engage different muscles on command is extremely valuable in being able to execute any exercise properly. You know, if we're training for aesthetics and if we're training to build muscle and training for hypertrophy, then the goal is to work the muscle, not to move weight from point A to point B. If the goal was to move weight from point A to point B, then I would go get a forklift or I'd find a more efficient way of moving it, but that wouldn't accomplish anything. So that's a crazy, silly example, obviously, but the goal is to work the muscles. And so there's been some pretty amazing physiques that have been built with no weight at all. Because if you can just get your mind inside the muscle like he's talking about, and like Arnold talks about in his book, which will be the next video that I do, then that's where the magic happens, and that's how muscles get that stimulus to grow. So he goes into a lot of different poses here and teaches different ways to pose. This guy has some of the best classic poses that I've ever seen. He's very, very famous for his ability to display broad shoulders and a narrow waist, and really what that classic physique looks like. Another big takeaway was on page 161, isolating the deltoids. This is from one of his, I almost said sermons. I feel like I'm preaching a sermon. It's like I'm reading something, teaching on it, reading something out loud from a book, teaching on it. So yeah, this is the Bible of building a classic physique by Steve Reeves. So this is from a session from a teaching that he did, and this is from the Q&A. So somebody asked the question: you mentioned earlier that one should avoid overdeveloping their trapezius muscles, the traps, these guys up here, and asked, are there ways to still train your shoulders and not have it affect their traps? And he said, certainly there are. As mentioned, if you overdevelop the traps, you will cultivate a round-shouldered look. One method is to target your delts, and effectively remove your traps is to lock your lats while performing the upright row, flex them hard, and concentrate on sustaining a fully flexed position while performing your upright rows. So that's something that I've been doing ever since I read that. As I think of my lats as like filling up with blood, or filling up like kind of like a balloon, and then it kind of locks my collarbone in place, the clavicle, and then that allows my shoulder joint to be able to move, so that I can make sure that if I'm doing an upright row, if I'm doing a press, if I'm doing a side lateral, that I'm isolating that side deltoid, that side muscle, to be able to work that and develop that instead of overdeveloping the traps again. I've had big traps my whole life. Started from bucking hay bales as a kid. I think there's some genetics that play into it too. And then in college, somebody told me that I had big traps, and so I thought it was cool. So I started like doing dumbbell shrugs and isolating them more and trying to develop them. But I never really gave too much attention to my shoulders, so that's why the judges at my first competitions told me that my shoulders needed improvement. I needed to lay off of the trap work. So that's pretty much it. That's this book in a nutshell. If you're a competitive bodybuilder, you probably already have a copy of it. If not, you need to get one. And if you're somebody that just wants to be healthy and just wants to look good overall, I think that this could benefit you as well. So hope that was helpful. Let me know what you thought.